Before we begin this chilling tale, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We release haunting historical mysteries every week. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. These dark stories happen closer to home than you think. Now let me tell you about the girl who collected the last breaths of the dead. The bottle slipped from Ailsa MacLeod's trembling fingers and shattered on the cellar floor. For 3 seconds she couldn't breathe. Her throat burned with phantom poison, her heart hammered with Malcolm Ross's terror, and her mind screamed with his final thought. They actually did it. 9 years old, and she had just died for the second time. 6 hours earlier, in Inverary, Scottish Highlands, October 1878. The blacksmith's body arrived wrapped in canvas and smelling of ash. Ailsa watched from the top of the cellar stairs as 4 men carried Malcolm Ross into her father's workshop, their faces grim but unsurprised. Heart seizure, they muttered. Happened at the forge. Dead before he hit the ground. Her father met them at the door, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. "Careful with him," Duncan MacLeod said quietly, guiding them to the preparation table. "Set him down gently." The men obeyed, then fled as quickly as propriety allowed. No one lingered in an undertaker's workshop unless they had to. Duncan closed the door and stood for a moment, looking down at the canvas-wrapped body. Then he sighed and began unwrapping it. "Poor Malcolm," he murmured. "Only 43 years old." Ailsa descended 3 steps, just enough to see but not enough to be intrusive. Her father glanced up at the sound. "You don't have to watch, child," Duncan said, not unkindly. "This is difficult work." "I don't mind, Papa." Her voice was soft, respectful. She had learned that tone years ago, the one that made adults think she was merely curious, not calculating. Duncan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Stay on the stairs, then, and if it becomes too much, go upstairs." "Yes, Papa." She waited. In the pocket of her dress, her fingers found the empty glass bottle, small, clear, stolen from her father's medicine cabinet 3 days ago. 23 identical bottles were already hidden in the cellar, each one labeled with a name and date. Mrs. Campbell, Thomas Morrison, young Jamie Fraser, Margaret Reed. 23 last breaths. She had started collecting them 2 years ago, though she couldn't have explained why. It began with Mrs. Campbell, when Ailsa had seen something shimmer in the air above the old woman's lips. A disturbance, like heat rising from summer stones. Without understanding the impulse, she had captured it in a bottle. That night, alone in her attic room, she had uncorked the bottle and inhaled. And she had died. Not truly died. Her body remained safe in her bed. But her consciousness had slipped into Mrs. Campbell's final moment, experiencing the old woman's peaceful surrender, feeling her life end as gently as a candle going out. The experience had terrified Ailsa so completely that she sealed the rest of her collection and never opened another bottle. Until tonight. Because something about Malcolm Ross felt wrong. Duncan worked methodically, washing ash from the blacksmith's skin, arranging the body with the respect he showed all the dead. Ailsa watched from the stairs, counting her father's movements, waiting for the moment she needed. "Ailsa, fetch me the carbolic acid," Duncan said without looking up. She descended immediately, retrieved the bottle from the supply shelf, and placed it on the work table. "Thank you." Her father poured a measure into a bowl, and the sharp chemical smell filled the workshop. "You should go upstairs now. Help yourself to some bread and butter. I'll be finished here in an hour." "Yes, Papa." She climbed the stairs, her footsteps deliberately loud. At the top, she paused, listening. Her father's movements were predictable. She had watched him prepare hundreds of bodies. She counted to 30. Then slipped off her shoes and crept back down in stockinged feet. Duncan had his back to her, bent over Malcolm's body, completely absorbed in his work. Ailsa moved in absolute silence. The shimmer was there, It was always there, hanging in the air above the deceased. To her eyes, it looked like captured light, slowly dissipating. She uncorked her bottle and held it in that space where Malcolm Ross's last breath lingered. The air felt heavy as it flowed into the glass. Wrong. It smelled faintly of metal and fear. She corked the bottle just as her father straightened and turned. "I thought you went upstairs." Duncan frowned, genuine confusion crossing his face. Ailsa held up the small book she had left on the bottom stair. Always prepared. Always thinking ahead. "I forgot my book." "Ah." Duncan's expression softened. "Well, off with you now. And Ailsa?" "Yes, Papa?" "You're a good girl. I know this life isn't easy for you, living here, surrounded by death. But you handle it better than most adults would." Guilt twisted in her stomach. If he only knew what she was really doing. "Good night, Papa." She climbed the stairs again, this time going all the way to her attic room. But she didn't read her book. She didn't eat bread and butter. She sat on her narrow bed, holding Malcolm Ross's final breath in her hands, and waited for her father to finish his work and go to sleep. Midnight. The cellar was cold and dark. Ailsa lit a single candle and descended the narrow stairs, each step creaking beneath her weight. The flame cast dancing shadows across stone walls lined with her father's supplies. Coffins in various sizes, bottles of embalming fluid, stacks of burial shrouds. And behind the oldest crates, hidden in an alcove that no one but her ever visited, her collection. 24 bottles now. She set the candle on an overturned crate and added Malcolm Ross's bottle to the end of the row. Her handwriting was careful and precise as she wrote the label. Malcolm Ross, October 1878. For a long moment she simply stared at the collection. 24 deaths, 24 final breaths, 24 secrets she had stolen without understanding why. She had seen Malcolm Ross 2 days ago at the market, buying nails. He had looked frightened, kept glancing over his shoulder, hands shaking. She had noticed, the way she noticed everything, but thought nothing of it. Now he was dead. Heart seizure, they said. But that shimmer above his lips had felt wrong, tainted, desperate. Ailsa picked up the bottle. The glass was cool and smooth in her palm. Inside, nothing visible to most eyes, yet to her it seemed to hold a faint luminescence, like moonlight trapped in crystal. She had spent 2 years avoiding this moment. 2 years terrified of experiencing another death, of losing herself in someone else's final agony. But she couldn't ignore it anymore. Her hands were steady as she uncorked the bottle. She raised it to her lips and inhaled deeply. The world tilted and dissolved. Heat slammed into her, the forge burning at full intensity, sweat running down her back, the familiar weight of a hammer in her calloused hands. The clang of metal on metal, rhythmic and satisfying. Red-hot iron bending to her will. Not her hands. Malcolm's hands. Not her will. His will. The boundary between self and other dissolved like salt in water, and Ailsa MacLeod ceased to exist. There was only Malcolm, and Malcolm was afraid. Terror coiled beneath the work, poisoning every movement. His thoughts crashed through the shared consciousness in fragmented panic. They know. God help me. They know. Should never have talked to that merchant from Glasgow. Should have kept my mouth shut. They'll kill me for this. The workshop door. He kept glancing at it, expecting someone, dreading someone. And then, pain. Not sudden. Not the sharp agony of a heart attack, but a creeping fire in his throat, his chest, spreading through his veins like molten iron. The hammer slipped from his grip and hit the floor with a clang that seemed to come from very far away. No. No. Not this. Poisoned. The word exploded in his dying mind with terrible clarity. The tea. The tea this morning. Henderson brought it to the forge, said it was a peace offering, said we should let bygones be bygones. I was a fool. Such a fool. Malcolm's knees buckled. The floor rushed up to meet him. Ash filled his mouth. The forge blurred, doubled, went gray at the edges. His lungs screamed for air but couldn't draw it. His heart stuttered, racing and failing simultaneously. And in those final seconds, as consciousness fragmented and darkness closed in, Malcolm Ross's last thought was not a prayer or a regret. It was a name. Henderson. Henderson killed me. Someone needs to know. Please, God, let someone... Nothing. Ailsa's body convulsed back into itself. The bottle slipped from her fingers and shattered on the cellar floor. She collapsed against the stone wall, her legs unable to support her weight, gasping and sobbing. Her throat burned with poison that wasn't there. Her heart hammered with terror that wasn't hers. Her lungs ached from suffocation she hadn't experienced. For several minutes, she couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't separate her consciousness from Malcolm's dying agony. Slowly, terribly slowly, she came back to herself. Her name was Ailsa MacLeod. She was 9 years old. She was alive. She was in her father's cellar, and Malcolm Ross had been murdered. The realization settled over her like frost forming on glass. Not a heart seizure, not natural causes. Poisoned, deliberately, by someone named Henderson. Ailsa looked down at the shattered glass at her feet, then up at the remaining 23 bottles arranged on their shelf. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was barely a whisper. How many others? The bottles sat in silent rows, each one holding a death the village had accepted without question. Heart failure, drowning, accident, natural causes. But what if they weren't? What if she had been collecting these breaths for a reason, some instinct drawing her to the wrong deaths, the suspicious ones, the murders disguised as tragedies? Ailsa's hands stopped shaking. She stood slowly, brushing glass fragments from her dress, and stared at her collection with new understanding. Malcolm's final thought echoed in her mind. Someone needs to know. I know, she whispered to the empty cellar. I know now. And tomorrow, she would find out who Henderson was and why he had killed a blacksmith. But tonight she had 23 more bottles, 23 more deaths to understand, 23 more truths to uncover. Somewhere in Inverary, a man named Henderson was sleeping peacefully, believing he had committed the perfect murder. He had no idea that a 9-year-old girl had stolen his victim's last breath, and she was coming for his secrets. Ailsa reached for the next bottle. Thomas Morrison, April 1877. Her hands were steady now, purpose replacing fear. She uncorked it and inhaled her third death. Above her, in the house where her father slept peacefully, normal life continued. But down in the cellar, surrounded by stolen breaths and shattered glass, Ailsa MacLeod began the investigation that would destroy everything. One death at a time, one truth at a time, one bottle at a time, until she knew everything. Ailsa inhaled 7 bottles that night, 7 deaths, 7 murders, 7 final moments of terror and betrayal that left her curled on the cellar floor, shaking and broken. By the time dawn crept through the narrow cellar window, she could no longer remember which memories were hers and which belonged to the dead. Thomas Morrison, April 1877, merchant. The warehouse was cold and smelled of raw wool. Morrison moved between stacks of timber, checking inventory by lamplight, his mind racing through the numbers he'd discovered. Footsteps behind him. Henderson? What are you doing here? The store is closed. Henderson's face emerged from the shadows, pleasant and smiling. We need to talk, Thomas, about the discrepancy you mentioned. There's nothing to discuss. Morrison backed away, lamp trembling in his grip. I saw the ledgers. Someone's been skimming profits from the shipping contracts. Thousands of pounds, Henderson. I have to report it. To whom? Henderson's smile never wavered. The magistrate? He's my brother-in-law. The town council. I am the council. Who exactly do you think will believe you? Morrison's back hit the timber stack. I have documents. Evidence. You had documents. Henderson's hand emerged from his coat holding a heavy iron bar. I found them this morning. Careless of you, leaving your office unlocked. Wait. No, please. The iron bar swung. Pain exploded through Morrison's skull like lightning. The lamp fell, shattering, oil spreading across the floor. His legs collapsed beneath him. As the world went dark, his final thought was bitter regret. Should have gone to Glasgow first. Should have told someone else. Should have... Ailsa gasped back into herself, her head throbbing with phantom pain. But she didn't stop. She reached for the next bottle. Margaret Reed, December 1876. Bookkeeper. Late night in Henderson's store. Ledgers spread across the desk. Numbers that didn't add up. Margaret had spent 3 months investigating, and she finally had proof. Smuggling. Tax evasion. Thousands of pounds hidden in false accounts. Tomorrow she would take the evidence to Glasgow. Footsteps on the stairs. Mr. Henderson, I thought you'd gone home. He smiled, that same pleasant smile. Working late, Margaret? You're very dedicated. Her eyes flickered to the report on her desk. His gaze followed. I see you've been thorough, Henderson said softly. The question is, who else have you told? No one. Yet. But Mr. Henderson, the amount of money involved is enough to rebuild this entire village. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets. To provide jobs, support families, create prosperity. Everyone benefits, Margaret. Why ruin that? It's illegal. It's practical. His hand moved faster than she could react. Something pressed against her face. Cloth, sweet-smelling, chemical, chloroform. Margaret tried to struggle, but her limbs went numb, heavy. The world blurred. Her last conscious thought, I should have left tonight. Should have run. Should have... Ailsa dropped the bottle but caught it before it shattered. Her vision swam. Her body felt like it was coming apart at the seams. But she kept going. Young Jamie Fraser, July 1877, 12 years old. Walking home from school, books under his arm, thinking about supper. A man approached with a kind smile, offering a penny to help carry boxes. Not Henderson. Someone else. Younger, thinner, with a teacher's patient voice. Just to the old Miller property, lad. Won't take but a moment. Jamie followed. Why wouldn't he? This was his teacher, Mr. Henderson's brother, a respected man. They reached the abandoned property, overgrown with bushes, the well hidden behind tangled growth. Could you look down there? Tell me if you see the bottom. Jamie leaned over the stone rim, curious, hands on his back. A shove, the sickening moment of falling. Cold water closed over his head. Not the lock. Deeper, darker, no way out. His small hands scraped against slimy stone walls, finding no purchase. Water filled his nose, his mouth, burning like fire. His final thought wasn't fear. It was confusion. Why? I didn't tell anyone. I only saw them at the harbor that one time. Why did Mr. Henderson push me? Ailsa came back sobbing, retching, drowning in air. A child. They had murdered a 12-year-old child. She forced herself to continue. Widow Douglas, March 1877. Witness lying in her bed, comfortable quilts around her, drifting toward sleep. Footsteps outside. Too heavy, too deliberate. Her bedroom door opened. A figure entered, broad-shouldered, wearing a constable's uniform. Constable Webb, what are you doing here at this hour? Good evening, Mrs. Douglas. His voice was professionally polite. I'm here about what you saw at the harbor last week. Her stomach clenched. I already told you. I saw nothing. That's not what you wrote to your sister in Glasgow. Webb approached the bed. We intercepted your letter. Very detailed, Mrs. Douglas. Names, dates, cargo descriptions. You've been watching the harbor for months. I'm an old woman who can't sleep. I walk at night. That's all. You're a witness. Webb pulled a pillow from beside her. And witnesses are problems. The pillow pressed down over her face, crushing. She tried to scream, to struggle, but she was 73 and weak from winter illness. Webb was strong, patient, methodical. Her lungs burned, her vision darkened. Her final prayer couldn't form on her lips. God forgive me for not speaking sooner. Ailsa was on her knees now, vomiting nothing, her body trying to reject deaths it had never experienced. 4 murders, 4 different victims, but the same conspiracy. Henderson, his brother Robert, Constable Webb. How many others? She reached for the next bottle with shaking hands. Alexander Grant, September 1876. Harbor assistant night shift at the docks, lantern in hand, checking the mooring lines. A ship had arrived after dark. Unusual, but not unheard of. Men unloading cargo in silence. No manifests. No customs inspection. Alexander recognized James Henderson directing the operation and Constable Webb standing guard. He should have left quietly, should have pretended he saw nothing. But curiosity made him step closer, squinting at the crates being unloaded. French labels. Wine, probably. Untaxed. A hand grabbed his shoulder. Evening, Alexander. Webb's voice was casual, almost friendly. Working late? Just checking the moorings. And seeing things you shouldn't. Webb's grip tightened. Come with me. Mr. Henderson wants a word. They walked to the end of the dock, away from the lanterns. Alexander's heart began to pound. It's just smuggled wine, isn't it? He tried to keep his voice steady. I won't say anything. I need this job. I know you won't say anything, Webb agreed pleasantly. Then he pushed. Cold water. Darkness. Alexander was a strong swimmer, but hands grabbed his ankles, pulling him down. Webb had jumped in after him, holding him under. His lungs screamed, his vision exploded with stars. His final thought, they're going to tell my mother I drowned drunk. She'll believe them. Everyone will believe them. Ailsa came back gasping, drowning, dying. 5 murders. She couldn't stop. Had to know everything. 2 more bottles. Sarah Campbell, June 1876. Seamstress working late in her cottage, mending clothes by candlelight. A knock at the door. She opened it to find James Henderson on her doorstep, hat in hand, expression apologetic. Mrs. Campbell, I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but I have a business proposition. She let him in. Why wouldn't she? Henderson was a respected merchant, and she needed the work. I need someone discreet, Henderson said, settling into her chair. Someone who can alter shipping manifests, change cargo descriptions. The handwriting must be perfect. I'm told you're an expert forger. Sarah's blood ran cold. I don't know what you mean. Your late husband taught you before he died. I've seen your work. Henderson's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm willing to pay very well. Or, he paused. I could inform the magistrate that you've been forging debt notices to avoid paying your rent. That's not true, isn't it? I have documents that say otherwise. Henderson stood. Think about it, Mrs. Campbell. Work for me or face charges. She refused. Of course she refused. 2 days later, her cottage caught fire while she slept. The village called it a tragic accident. A fallen candle, old timber, a woman who couldn't escape in time. But in her final moments, as smoke filled her lungs and flames consumed her home, Sarah Campbell knew the truth. Henderson did this. Because I said no. Someone needs to stop him. Please, someone, Ailsa screamed. The bottle shattered in her grip, glass cutting her palm, blood mixing with the tears streaming down her face. 6 murders. 1 more bottle. Just 1 more. She reached for it with bloody hands. Klaus Brennan, February 1876, harbor master. Standing in his office, looking at the shipping records that didn't match reality. He'd been harbor master for 20 years, and he knew when cargo was being moved off the books. He confronted Henderson privately, man to man, thinking they could resolve this like gentlemen. "I'm giving you one chance to make this right," Klaus said firmly. "Declare the shipments properly, pay the taxes, or I go to the magistrate." Henderson nodded slowly, seeming to consider. "You're right, of course. I've been foolish. Tell you what, let me buy you dinner. We'll discuss how to handle this properly. No hard feelings." They met at the inn. Henderson was charming, apologetic, generous with the wine. Klaus drank. The wine was excellent. An hour later, his heart began to race. His vision blurred. The room spun. "Henderson, I don't feel—" "I know." Henderson's voice was sympathetic. "Heart failure. It happens to men your age. The doctor will confirm it. These things are tragic but natural." Klaus tried to stand to call for help, but his body wouldn't obey. He collapsed, his heart stuttering, racing, failing. His final thought: "Margaret Brennan, my wife. She'll be alone. Who will take care of—" Ailsa returned to herself for the last time. 7 bottles, 7 murders, 7 victims of the same conspiracy. She lay on the cold cellar floor, blood from her cut palm pooling around broken glass, her mind fractured into 7 different deaths. She was 9 years old, and she had just lived through 7 murders. Above her, she heard her father's footsteps. Morning had come. Duncan was starting his day, making tea, preparing for work. Normal life continuing while she lay in the cellar with the weight of 7 deaths crushing her chest. Ailsa forced herself to sit up. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely stand. But her mind was working with crystalline clarity. Henderson wasn't just one murderer. He was the center of a web. His brother Robert, the schoolteacher who had drowned Jamie Fraser. Constable Webb, who had smothered Widow Douglas and drowned Alexander Grant. Someone else who had set the fire that killed Sarah Campbell. A smuggling operation protected by murder. How many others were involved? The magistrate, the harbor officials, the town council, and she had 16 bottles left. 16 more deaths that might reveal the full scope of the conspiracy. But Ailsa couldn't inhale another breath. Not today. Maybe not ever. Her mind was fracturing, her sense of self eroding with each death she experienced. She looked at her blood-stained hands and made a decision. She couldn't keep investigating alone. She needed help. But who could she trust in a village where the constable was a murderer and the merchant controlled everything? Her father. Duncan MacLeod was the only person in Inverary who couldn't be bought or threatened. He prepared every body, saw every death, and he had taught her to value truth above comfort. She would have to tell him everything. Show him the collection, explain what she could do, make him understand that 7 people had been murdered and she was the only one who knew. He would think she was mad, or cursed, or possessed. But he was her father, and she had no one else. Ailsa climbed the cellar stairs on trembling legs, leaving bloody handprints on the wall. At the top, she paused, listening to her father humming softly in the kitchen. This was the moment everything would change. She took a deep breath, her own breath, not someone's dying gasp, and opened the door. "Papa," she said quietly, "I need to show you something in the cellar, and I need you to believe me." Duncan turned from the stove, his expression shifting from surprise to alarm when he saw her bloodied hands and tear-stained face. "Ailsa, what happened? Are you hurt?" "No," she said, "but 7 people were murdered, and I can prove it." For a long moment her father didn't move. Then he set down the teapot with careful precision and crossed the kitchen in 3 strides. "Let me see your hands." Ailsa held them out. Blood still oozed from the cuts where the bottle had shattered in her grip. Duncan examined the wounds, his face unreadable. These need cleaning. Sit. Papa, did you hear what I said? I heard you. He fetched clean water and bandages. You said 7 people were murdered. You're covered in blood from the cellar where you've been all night, and you look like you haven't slept in a week. He began cleaning her palms with methodical care. So before we discuss murder, we discuss this. She sat in silence while he worked, waited for him to dismiss her as mad, to send for Dr. MacDonald, to lock her in her room. Instead, he wrapped her hands in clean bandages and said, "Now, show me what you're talking about." The cellar looked like a crime scene. Shattered glass glittered on the floor. Blood smeared the stones. And on the hidden shelf behind the old crates, 17 bottles sat in neat rows, each one labeled with a name and date. Duncan descended the stairs slowly, candle in hand. He stood before the collection for a full minute without speaking. "How long?" he finally asked. 2 years. 2 years you've been stealing my bottles. 2 years you've been—" He gestured helplessly at the shelf. "What exactly are these, Ailsa?" Last breaths. Her father turned to face her, and for the first time in her life, Ailsa saw genuine fear in his eyes. "That's not possible." "I can prove it." Ailsa reached for one of the bottles with trembling hands. Mrs. Campbell, the first one, the only safe one. "When someone dies, there's something left in the air above their lips, like a shimmer. Most people can't see it, but I can. And if I capture it and inhale it—" She paused. "I experience their death. I become them in their final moment." Duncan stared at her. "You're telling me you've been—" "What? Living through people's deaths?" 8 times, Ailsa whispered. "Mrs. Campbell 2 years ago. And last night, 7 more." "That's impossible," Duncan repeated, but his voice was weaker now. "Ailsa, you're exhausted. You've been reading too many—" "Malcolm Ross was poisoned by James Henderson," Ailsa interrupted. "Henderson brought tea to his forge 3 days ago, said it was a peace offering. Malcolm drank it and thought he was dying of heart failure, but in his last moments he realized, he knew, he'd been poisoned. His final thought was Henderson's name." Duncan's face went white. "Thomas Morrison was beaten to death with an iron bar in his warehouse," Ailsa continued, her voice gaining strength. "Henderson killed him because he discovered discrepancies in the shipping ledgers. Margaret Reed was chloroformed in her office." "Stop." Duncan held up a hand. "Stop. How could you possibly know these details?" "Because I died with them, Papa." Ailsa's voice broke. "I felt Malcolm's throat burning with poison. I felt Morrison's skull crack. I felt Margaret Reed's consciousness fade as the chloroform took her. I felt all of it." Tears streamed down her face. "And I can't make it stop. I can't forget. Their deaths are in my head forever." Duncan stood frozen, visibly struggling with what he was hearing. "You don't believe me," Ailsa said quietly. "I don't know what I believe." Her father's voice was strained. "What you're describing it's impossible. It's witchcraft or madness or—" "Then test it." Ailsa held out Mrs. Campbell's bottle. "Inhale it. See for yourself." "Ailsa, I'm not going to—" "You prepare every body in this village, Papa. You knew Mrs. Campbell. You remember how she died, peacefully, in her sleep, surrounded by her quilts. If you inhale this bottle and experience her death exactly as I described it 2 years ago, exactly as you saw her body positioned, exactly as it happened—" She thrust the bottle toward him. "Then you'll know I'm telling the truth." Duncan looked at the bottle like it was a venomous snake. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. "If this is real," he said quietly, "if you've been carrying this alone for 2 years, Christ, Ailsa, what have you endured? Test it, Papa. Please." Duncan uncorked the bottle with shaking hands. He looked at Ailsa once more, searching her face for any sign of deception or delusion. Then he raised the bottle to his lips and inhaled. His body went rigid. The bottle slipped from his fingers, but Ailsa caught it before it could shatter. She watched her father's face transform. Confusion, then wonder, then profound peace, then nothing. 10 seconds later, Duncan gasped and staggered backward, collapsing onto the stairs. "Papa, I was—" He stared at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I was her. I was Mrs. Campbell. I felt her bones aching, smelled the lavender on her pillow, heard the church bell ringing 6 times. And then," his voice dropped to a whisper, "and then I died. Peacefully. Gently. Just let go." Ailsa knelt beside him. "Now do you believe me?" Duncan pulled her into a fierce embrace, his whole body shaking. My God, Ailsa. You've been doing this for 2 years. You've died 8 times. And I never knew. I never suspected. I hid it well. Too well." He released her and looked at the remaining bottles with new understanding. "And you're saying 7 of these are murders?" "At least 7. Maybe more. I haven't inhaled all of them." Ailsa's voice was barely audible. "I can't, Papa. Last night broke something in me. I can't die again. Not for a long time." Duncan stood slowly, his legs unsteady, and stared at the collection. "Then we work with what you know. 7 murders. Henderson, you said. James Henderson and his brother Robert, and Constable Webb. There are others, too. I felt their presence in some of the deaths, but I don't know all the names." "A conspiracy." Duncan's voice hardened. "Smuggling?" "And anyone who discovered it died." "We need evidence," Duncan said, his practical mind taking over. "Real evidence. We can't tell anyone about—" He gestured at the bottles. "This. They'd burn you as a witch. But if we can find physical proof of Henderson's crimes—" "Widow Douglas wrote a letter," Ailsa said, "to her sister in Glasgow, detailed information about the smuggling operation. Constable Webb intercepted it before he murdered her. He told her that right before he—" She couldn't finish. Duncan's jaw clenched. If that letter still exists, it would be in Webb's office. "Papa, you can't break into—" "Can I?" Duncan's eyes blazed with anger. 7 people, Ailsa. 7 murders that I helped cover up by ruling them natural causes. I prepared their bodies. I assured their families they died peacefully. I was Henderson's unwitting accomplice. His hands balled into fists. If there's evidence in Webb's office, I'm getting it. What if you're caught? Then I'm caught. Duncan headed for the stairs. Rest. You look like death itself. I'll be back in 2 hours. Papa. He paused and looked back. I believe you, Ailsa, and I'm going to help you. But you need to stay here and recover. What you did last night, experiencing 7 deaths, that would break most adults. You're 9 years old, so rest. Let me carry this burden for a while. Then he was gone. Ailsa sat alone in the cellar, surrounded by her collection of deaths, and for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel quite so alone. 3 hours later, Duncan returned empty-handed, his face grim. Nothing? Ailsa asked. Oh, I found things. Duncan set a bundle on the kitchen table. Webb's desk was full of interesting documents, shipping manifests that don't match official records, payment ledgers in code, letters from Henderson giving orders. He unwrapped the bundle to reveal a stack of papers. But no letter from Widow Douglas. Ailsa's heart sank. He destroyed it. Maybe, or hid it somewhere else. Duncan studied the documents he'd stolen. But these might be enough, if I can get them to the magistrate in Glasgow. A loud knock at the door made them both freeze. Mr. MacLeod, Constable Webb's voice called from outside. Open up, please. We need to speak with you. Duncan and Ailsa locked eyes. He knows, Ailsa whispered. Hide these. Duncan shoved the documents into her hands. Cellar, now, and don't come out no matter what you hear. Papa, go. Ailsa ran for the cellar as the pounding on the door grew louder. From her hiding place at the bottom of the stairs, she heard her father open the door. Constable Webb, what can I do for you? Duncan's voice was perfectly calm. There's been a break-in at my office. Certain documents have gone missing. Webb's tone was cold. Documents that were in a locked drawer. Only a few people in this village have the skills to pick locks, you being one of them. I'm an undertaker, not a thief. Are you? A new voice, James Henderson. Because I find it odd that on the very day my activities come under scrutiny, you decide to ransack the constable's office. I haven't ransacked anything. Then you won't mind if we search your premises. Henderson's voice was silk over steel. Just to clear this matter up. Silence. Then Duncan said quietly, not without a warrant. We have one. Webb's footsteps entered the house. Signed by Magistrate Thompson, Henderson's brother-in-law, an hour ago. Ailsa pressed herself against the cellar wall, clutching the stolen documents. Above her, she heard boots on floorboards, furniture being moved, drawers being opened. Nothing in the workshop, one man called. Check upstairs, Henderson ordered. More footsteps, more searching. Ailsa looked at the cellar stairs. They hadn't checked here yet. But they would. She had minutes at most. Her eyes fell on her collection of bottles. 17 witnesses to Henderson's crimes. 17 deaths he thought were perfectly hidden, and the stolen documents in her hands. She couldn't let him find either. Quickly, silently, she wrapped the bottles in cloth and stuffed them into a canvas bag. The documents she folded small and tucked into her dress pocket. Footsteps on the stairs. Check the cellar. Webb's voice. Ailsa looked around desperately. There was nowhere to hide down here, nowhere they wouldn't search. But there was a coal chute, a narrow opening that led to the street outside. She squeezed through it just as the cellar door opened. The alley was cold and dark. Ailsa pressed herself against the wall, clutching her bag of bottles, listening to the sounds of the search continuing inside. Her father's voice, raised in anger. You have no right. A crash, something breaking. Where is she? Henderson's voice, no longer pleasant. Where's your daughter, MacLeod? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. The girl, Ailsa, where is she? Another crash, her father's grunt of pain. Ailsa's hands clenched around the bag. Every instinct screamed at her to go back, to help, to do something. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. Don't come out no matter what you hear. She forced herself to move. One step, then another. Away from the house, away from her father's grunts of pain and Henderson's questions. Toward the coach station, toward Glasgow, toward justice. Behind her, something shattered. Her father cried out. Ailsa ran. The Glasgow coach left at midnight. Ailsa bought a ticket with coins she'd stolen from her father's jar, her hands shaking so badly she could barely count the money. You traveling alone, lass? The driver looked concerned. Bit young for that. My aunt is meeting me in Glasgow, Ailsa lied. Family emergency. The driver studied her. This small, pale girl with haunted eyes and a bag clutched to her chest like a lifeline. All right then. Climb aboard. Ailsa took a seat by the window and stared back at Inverarayre. Somewhere in that village, her father was being interrogated, possibly beaten, maybe worse. And she had run. The coach lurched forward. As they rolled through the dark streets, Ailsa saw him. James Henderson, standing outside his store, watching the coach pass. Their eyes met through the window. Henderson smiled. Then he raised one hand and drew his finger across his throat. A promise. The coach carried her away into darkness, and Ailsa clutched her bag of bottles and stolen documents and whispered a prayer for her father. She was 9 years old, alone, with evidence of a murder conspiracy and no one to protect her. But she had the truth, and she would make sure it was heard. Glasgow, 2 weeks later, Ailsa had learned what it meant to be invisible. She'd found work washing dishes at a tavern, paid in meals and a corner of the kitchen to sleep in. The bottles stayed hidden under her thin blanket, and the stolen documents never left her person. Every day she went to Magistrate Thompson's office. Every day his clerk turned her away. "The magistrate is busy. Come back tomorrow." The magistrate doesn't see children without adult supervision. The magistrate has no time for wild accusations from runaways. On the 14th day, Ailsa stopped asking politely. She waited until the clerk left for lunch, then walked straight past his empty desk and into Thompson's office. The magistrate looked up from his papers, startled. "What? Who are you? How did you get in here?" "My name is Ailsa MacLeod." She set the stolen documents on his desk. "And you need to read these. Now." "Young lady, you can't just—" "James Henderson is running a smuggling operation in Inverary. He's murdered at least 7 people to hide it. My father discovered proof and stole these documents from Constable Webb's office." Ailsa's voice was cold, steady. "Then Henderson and Webb searched our house, beat my father, and tried to find me. I escaped. My father might be dead. And you're going to read these documents and send men to arrest Henderson before he kills anyone else." Thompson stared at her. "You're Duncan MacLeod's daughter. You know my father?" "I knew him years ago, before he moved to Inverary." Thompson picked up the document slowly. "These are serious accusations." "They're true, every word." Thompson read in silence for several minutes. His expression grew darker with each page. "These are shipping manifests," he said finally. "Coded payment records, letters arranging illegal cargo transfers." He looked at Ailsa. "This is enough to investigate, but it's not enough to convict. Henderson will claim these are forgeries, that your father manufactured them out of spite. Then I'll testify. You're 9 years old. Henderson's lawyers will tear you apart." Thompson set down the papers. "We need more. Physical evidence of the smuggling operation. Witnesses who'll testify against Henderson." "What about my father?" Ailsa's voice cracked. "You said you knew him. Are you going to help him or not?" Thompson studied her for a long moment. "I'll send men to Inverary, quietly, to investigate and ensure your father's safety. But Ailsa, if Henderson has hurt Duncan, if he's destroyed evidence, if he's intimidated potential witnesses—" He paused. "This might not end the way you want." "It has to." Ailsa's hands clenched into fists. 7 people are dead. Someone has to pay. Justice and revenge aren't the same thing, child. "I don't want revenge," Ailsa said quietly. "I want the truth. I want Henderson in a courtroom, forced to answer for what he's done. I want their families to know how they really died." Thompson nodded slowly. "Then we'll need to build an ironclad case, and that means going back to Inverary." "I can't go back. Henderson knows I have evidence. He'll kill me." "Not if you're under official protection." Thompson stood. "And not if we're clever about it. Tell me, Ailsa, you said your father prepared every body in Inverary?" "Yes, for 15 years. Then he'll have kept records. Cause of death, condition of the body, personal observations." Thompson's eyes gleamed. "If we can access those records and compare them to what actually happened, if we can find patterns, inconsistencies, evidence that these natural deaths were actually murders, we prove the conspiracy." "Exactly." Thompson moved to his door and called for his clerk. "I'm assembling an investigation team. We leave for Inverary tomorrow morning." Ailsa felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thompson looked grim. If Henderson has killed 7 people to protect his operation, he won't hesitate to kill more. This will be dangerous, Ailsa, and it might not end well. I know, she said, but I have to try. Because 17 bottles sat in her bag, 17 witnesses to Henderson's crimes. And even if no court would ever hear their testimony, Ailsa carried their deaths with her. She owed them the truth. In Veraray, 3 days later, the town looked smaller than Ailsa remembered. She rode in a coach with Magistrate Thompson and 4 armed officers, hidden behind curtained windows, her heart pounding as they passed familiar streets. Henderson's store, the constable's office, and finally, her father's workshop. The building was dark, silent. "Wait here," Thompson ordered. He and 2 officers approached the door. Ailsa pressed her face against the window, watching. Thompson knocked, waited, knocked again. No answer. He tried the door. It opened. The officers entered with weapons drawn. Seconds passed like hours. Then Thompson reappeared in the doorway and beckoned. Ailsa flew out of the coach. Inside, the workshop was destroyed, furniture overturned, supplies scattered, equipment smashed, and blood, dark stains on the floor. "Papa," Ailsa screamed. "He's not here," Thompson said quickly. "There's no body. That's good. That means he might still be alive." "Or Henderson took him somewhere else to kill him," one officer muttered. Ailsa ran to the cellar stairs. Her hiding place was exposed. The crates moved. The shelf where she'd kept her collection knocked over. But they hadn't found the bottles. She'd taken them with her. "Miss MacLeod," Thompson called from upstairs. "We found something." She climbed back up to find Thompson holding a ledger, her father's death records. "This documents every death Duncan prepared over the past 15 years, Thompson said, flipping through pages. "Causes of death, conditions of bodies, personal observations." He looked at Ailsa. "Can you identify which ones were actually murders?" Ailsa took the ledger with shaking hands. She turned to the entries she knew by heart. Malcolm Ross, October 1878. Heart failure. Body showed signs of recent distress, sweating, vomiting, attributed to final cardiac event. Thomas Morrison, April 1877. Accidental death from fall. Severe head trauma. Blood spatter patterns inconsistent with simple fall, but attributed to multiple impacts. Margaret Reed, December 1876. Fall downstairs. Neck broken. Faint chemical smell on body, possibly cleaning products. Her father had noticed. He hadn't understood what he was seeing, but he documented every inconsistency, every detail that didn't quite fit. "These 7, Ailsa said, marking the entries. "All murders. My father's notes show the evidence was there, but no one was looking for it. Until now." Thompson took the ledger. "This, combined with the documents you brought from Webb's office, gives us enough to make arrests. But Ailsa..." He hesitated. "Your father. If Henderson has him, if he's using him as leverage..." "We find Henderson first," Ailsa said coldly. "We arrest him, and we make him tell us where my father is." Thompson nodded. "Officers, with me. We're going to Henderson's store." James Henderson was drinking tea when they arrived. He looked up as Magistrate Thompson and 4 armed officers entered his store, his expression shifting from surprise to calculation. "Magistrate Thompson, what an unexpected visit." Henderson's voice was perfectly pleasant. "How can I help you?" "James Henderson, you're under arrest for smuggling, conspiracy, and murder." Thompson's voice rang with authority. "Officers, secure him." Henderson didn't resist as they bound his hands. His eyes scanned the group until they landed on Ailsa, standing half hidden behind Thompson. His pleasant expression cracked. Just for a moment. Then his smile returned, colder than before. "Ah, the MacLeod girl. I wondered where you'd run to." "Where is my father?" Ailsa stepped forward. What did you do to him? Do? I did nothing. Your father is the criminal here, breaking into Constable Webb's office, stealing official documents, fleeing before he could be questioned. Henderson's voice was calm, reasonable. I'm the victim in this situation, Miss MacLeod. You're a murderer. Am I? That's a serious accusation from a child. Henderson looked at Thompson. I assume you have actual evidence for these charges? We do. Thompson held up the stolen documents. Your shipping records, your coded payment ledgers, your correspondence arranging illegal cargo transfers, all recovered from Constable Webb's office, where you kept them as insurance against your co-conspirators. For the first time, Henderson's composure slipped. Those were stolen property. Evidence of multiple crimes, Thompson interrupted, including 7 murders. 7. That's absurd. I've never killed anyone. Malcolm Ross. Ailsa's voice cut through the room like a blade. You poisoned him with tea. Thomas Morrison, beaten to death in his warehouse after he discovered your smuggling operation. Margaret Reed chloroformed in her own office. Sarah Campbell burned alive when she refused to forge documents for you. Enough. Henderson's mask shattered completely. You can't prove any of that. Those were accidents, natural deaths, tragedies. Every single one was ruled as such by the proper authorities. Authorities you controlled, Thompson said. But we're not using Inveraray's authorities anymore. These charges will be tried in Glasgow, far from your influence. Henderson's eyes burned with rage. You'll never convict me. You have documents that could be forgeries and the fantasies of a disturbed child. We also have your father's death records, Ailsa said quietly. 15 years of careful documentation. Every inconsistency, every detail that didn't fit natural death. He noticed everything, Henderson. He just didn't realize what he was seeing until I showed him. Your father, Henderson's smile returned, vicious and cruel, won't be testifying to anything. Neither will Constable Webb or my brother or any of the others you think are involved. They're loyal. And loyalty, Miss MacLeod, is stronger than your pathetic evidence. Then where is he? Ailsa's voice broke. Where's my father? Henderson leaned forward as far as his bonds allowed. Do you really want to know? Because I can tell you exactly what happened to Duncan MacLeod after you abandoned him and ran away like a coward. Thompson stepped between them. Officers, take him to the carriage, and someone find Constable Webb. We're arresting everyone involved in this conspiracy. As Henderson was dragged away, he called back over his shoulder. You'll find your father eventually, girl. When the tide goes out, the loch gives up all its secrets. Ailsa's blood turned to ice. The loch. Alexander Grant had drowned in the loch. Webb had held him under until his lungs filled with water. Had they done the same to her father? Search the loch, she said urgently. He said the loch. Papa might be. We'll search, Thompson assured her. Every inch. If Duncan is there, we'll find him. But his voice held no hope. They found him 3 hours later. Not in the loch. In the old stone jail beneath the constable's office, where Inverary kept its prisoners before transferring them to Glasgow. Duncan MacLeod was unconscious, badly beaten, locked in a cell that hadn't been used in years. But alive. Papa. Ailsa ran to the bars as officers worked to open the lock. Duncan's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded his face, then recognition, then relief so profound it brought tears to his battered face. Ailsa, he whispered. You got out. Thank God. You got out. The door opened and Ailsa threw herself into her father's arms, sobbing. I'm sorry I ran. I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry. Shh. Duncan held her with what strength he had left. You did exactly right. You survived. You brought help. He pulled back to look at her. Did you find Thompson? Did you show him the documents? We arrested Henderson, Ailsa said. And we're going to arrest all of them, everyone involved, because of the documents you stole and Papa's death records documenting all the inconsistencies." "Good," Duncan breathed. "That's good." Thompson appeared in the doorway. "Mr. MacLeod, we're taking you to the hospital. You need medical attention." "I need to see this through," Duncan said stubbornly, trying to stand. His legs gave out immediately. "Papa." "Hospital first," Thompson said firmly. "Justice second. Your daughter has waited 2 weeks to know if you were alive. Let her have a few more hours of certainty before you throw yourself back into danger." Duncan looked at Ailsa and seemed to truly see her for the first time. The dark circles under her eyes, her too thin frame, the haunted exhaustion in every line of her small body. "I'm sorry," he whispered, touching her face with a bruised hand. "I'm so sorry you went through this alone." "You're alive," Ailsa said, tears streaming. "That's all that matters." The trial took place 6 weeks later. Glasgow's courtroom was packed with spectators who had come to watch the prosecution of James Henderson and his conspiracy. Ailsa sat in the front row, her father beside her, as Magistrate Thompson presented the evidence. The stolen documents proving smuggling operations. Duncan's death records documenting inconsistencies in 7 natural deaths. Testimony from Margaret Brennan, who had finally found the courage to admit her husband Klaus had been meeting with Henderson the night before he died. Testimony from Thomas Morrison's widow, who remembered her husband mentioning discrepancies in shipping ledgers. Testimony from young Jamie Fraser's mother, who described how her son had come home frightened one day, saying he'd seen men unloading cargo at the harbor at midnight. One by one, the pieces fell into place. Henderson maintained his innocence throughout, his lawyers arguing that the evidence was circumstantial, that the deaths were coincidental, that a respected businessman was being destroyed by innuendo and hearsay, until the final day, when Duncan MacLeod took the stand. "I have prepared bodies for 15 years, Duncan said, his voice steady despite his still healing injuries. "I know what natural death looks like, and Malcolm Ross did not die naturally." "Objection," Henderson's lawyer stood. "The witness is not a medical doctor." "Sustained," the judge said. "Mr. MacLeod, please limit your testimony to facts you can verify." "I can verify," Duncan continued, "that Malcolm Ross's body showed signs of poisoning, vomiting, excessive sweating, burn marks in his throat consistent with corrosive substances. I documented these findings in my records and attributed them to cardiac distress because I had no reason to suspect murder." He looked directly at Henderson. "But they were there. The evidence was there. I just wasn't looking for it." "And Margaret Reed?" the prosecutor asked. "Chemical smell on her body when I received her. Specifically chloroform. I noted it as possible cleaning products, but the concentration was far too strong for that explanation." "Thomas Morrison?" "Blood spatter patterns inconsistent with a single fall. Multiple impact points. Signs of defensive wounds on his hands." One by one, Duncan detailed the evidence he had unknowingly documented. The courtroom was silent. Henderson's face grew paler with each revelation. "The prosecution rests," Thompson said finally. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood and read the verdict. "On the charge of smuggling, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of the murder of Malcolm Ross, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of the murder of Thomas Morrison, we find the defendant guilty." 7 times, the foreman read, "Guilty." 7 murders, 7 convictions. James Henderson stood motionless as the judge sentenced him to hang. His brother Robert received the same sentence. Constable Webb received life imprisonment. 4 others received sentences ranging from 10 years to life. And through it all, Ailsa sat silent, her hand gripping her father's, feeling the weight of 17 bottles in the bag at her feet. 17 witnesses who would never testify, but whose deaths had been answered. 6 months later, the cottage in Glasgow was small but comfortable. Duncan had found work with a local undertaker, and Ailsa had enrolled in school. She was learning to be normal, to be a child instead of a collector of deaths. But the bottles remained. 17 of them, wrapped in cloth, kept in a wooden box beneath her bed. She hadn't inhaled another breath since that terrible night in Inverary, hadn't captured another death, hadn't sought out the shimmer that appeared above dying lips. But she couldn't destroy the bottles either. They were proof, even if only to herself, that she hadn't imagined any of it, that the deaths had been real, the murders had happened, the justice had been earned. One evening, her father found her sitting by the window, holding Mrs. Campbell's bottle. "Still thinking about it?" Duncan asked gently. "Always," Ailsa admitted. "I carry their deaths with me, Papa. Every single one. I close my eyes and I'm dying again. 7 different ways. 8, if you count Mrs. Campbell." Duncan sat beside her. "The magistrate asked me yesterday if you might be willing to work with them. If there are other cases, other suspicious deaths, you could—" "No." Ailsa's voice was firm. "Never again. What I did in Inverary was necessary. But Papa, it broke me. Parts of my mind don't fit together right anymore. I don't know where my memories end and their deaths begin." "I understand." Duncan put his arm around her. "No more deaths. You've earned the right to just be a child." Ailsa looked at the bottle in her hands, Mrs. Campbell's final peaceful breath. "Do you think they're at peace now?" she asked quietly. "Malcolm and Thomas and Margaret and all the others, do you think they know Henderson was punished?" "I think," Duncan said carefully, "that the dead don't care about justice. Justice is for the living, for the families who need to understand how their loved ones really died, for the community that needs to know evil was stopped." He took the bottle from her hands and set it aside. "You gave them that, Ailsa. You gave them truth. That's more than most victims ever receive." "But I couldn't save them." "No one could save them. They were already gone. But you honored them by refusing to let their deaths be forgotten or misnamed." Ailsa leaned against her father's shoulder. "I'm tired, Papa. So tired." "Then rest." Duncan held her close. "Rest and heal. Let the dead rest too. You've done enough." That night, Ailsa made a decision. She took the 17 bottles to the River Clyde, stood on the bank in the moonlight, holding the cloth-wrapped bundle. One by one, she opened the bottles and poured their contents into the river, not destroying them, setting them free. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you," she whispered to the night air. "But I made sure you were heard. I made sure he paid. I hope that's enough." The last bottle was Malcolm Ross's replacement, empty, never filled, meant for her father if he had died. Ailsa held it for a long moment. Then she threw it as hard as she could. It shattered against the rocks, the sound echoing across the water. She walked home lighter than she'd been in 2 years. The box beneath her bed now held only empty bottles, 17 glass containers that had once held death, but now held only air. A reminder of what she'd endured, what she'd survived, what she'd accomplished. But not a burden anymore, just memory. And memory, unlike death, she could learn to live with.